ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. Namo Ramana. Welcome to today's evening Atma Vichara. As usual, we will be reading from the book Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers by Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara by our founder President Sri A.R. Natarajanji. After reading the question answer, we would be doing Atma Vichara for 20 minutes, following which our President Dr. Sarada Natarajan would be talking about the subject of Atma Vichara more further in detail. And then we conclude with prayers to Bhagavan. In the continuing questions that we have seen, we are now arrived at question number 50 in this book. The question put by devotee is, if doubts, fears and worries harass me during meditation, how can they be most efficiently removed? I repeat the question. If doubts, fears and worries harass me during meditation, how can they be most efficiently removed? Bhagavan, ask yourself, to whom do these doubts, fears and worries occur? And they will vanish. Cease to pay attention to them. Pay attention to the self within. Fears can only arise when there are two, or when anybody else exists apart from, or separate from, or outside of you. If you turn the mind inwards towards the self, fears will disappear. If you try to remove a doubt or fear, another doubt or fear will arise. There will be no end to it. The best method of annihilating them is to ask, to whom do they occur? And they will disappear. Destroying a tree by plucking its leaves one by one is impossible. Other leaves will grow by the time you pluck a few. Remove the root of the tree, the ego, and the whole tree with its leaf and branches will be destroyed. Prevention is better than cure. I read Bhagavan's answer once again. Ask yourself, to whom do these doubts, fears and worries occur? And they will vanish. Cease to pay attention to them. Pay attention to the self within. Fears can only arise when there are two, or when anybody else exists apart from, or separate from, or outside of you. If you turn the mind inwards towards the self, fears will disappear. If you try to remove a doubt or fear, another doubt or fear will arise. There will be no end to it. The best method of annihilating them is to ask to whom do they occur, and they will disappear. Destroying a tree by plucking its leaf one by one is impossible. Other leaves will grow by the time you pluck a few. Remove the root of the tree, the ego, and the whole tree with its leaves and branches will be destroyed. Prevention is better than cure. It is very obvious that in the waking state, when there is duality, maybe even in the dream, is when the fear is. And obviously, the devotee here is asking about the fear during meditation, but it is also a part of the waking state. So, whenever there is two, Bhagavan is saying here, there is always this possibility of doubt and fear because there is options there are dualities there. And that is the whole problem due to which what is very natural, the self which alone is not seen. We are seeing it through an instrument which is always creating division. Instead of why do we can even question why do I have to see through this instrument of the eyes? Why do I have to see through this instrument of intellect? Why do I have to see? Because in deep sleep, I don't have this and I don't worry looking for it. I don't go looking where did my intellect go away? Why, and therefore I don't feel I am less of an intellect person either. So why in the waking state that I need to hold on to these instruments which are constantly creating or giving reality to duality? Why can't I not attend to them and simply remain as the self, as Bhagavan is asking? This is an inquiry that we need to do because all of this instrument is visible to one entity, which is the self. Therefore, instead of holding on to any of these instruments, why not hold on to the source, which to whom all of this is visible? Bhagavan would give a similar analogy. If we try to hold on to the head of the shadow, if we try make an attempt to hold to the head of the shadow, as we move forward to hold the head, the shadow would also move forward. And no matter how much we try in that way, we would never catch the shadow at all. All we need to do, Bhagavan says, is put the hand on one's own head, and the shadow also appears to be captured. So, all we need to do is get back to our own self. Instead of relying on all these instruments, which is only an instrument to the self, why not get back to the self which alone is? Bhagavan also says in Saddarshanam, real knowledge is not the knowledge or ignorance, but to whom is this knowledge and ignorance when we find that is the true knowledge. This, we take it for granted. To whom is this? We take it for granted. We believe very strongly the data that is in the form of the knowledge or coming from the instruments. And therefore, we want to see how we can annihilate it, how we can control the instrument and so forth. But to whom is this when we inquire and go back to the source and we see that in the source there is no such duality where there is self alone. And therefore, then there is no need to do anything much with all the instruments and trying to control them or annihilate them. This is what Bhagavan is saying. By instead of trying to pluck individual leaves of a tree, how far can we keep going plucking the leaves? By the time we are done with one branch and move on to the second one, the branch the old branch may again throw out some leaves. So how do we go about plucking? So instead of doing that, he's asking us to go back to the root due to which all of this is. So once we go to the source, that is the root is the ego, that duality itself. Bhagavan says, I is the first person divide. It is the first person plural. So the I idea itself is the first division. So if we go to the source of the division and uproot it, that the only way to uproot it is to see that there is absolutely no division at all. When we see that there is absolutely no division in reality, and this division of I is only an imagination, then alone we will be able to see that we don't have to do anything, that we are the self, and all, if at all this ego rises and creates a duality, that alone we have to let go. The sadhana is only to let go the duality, the idea of duality. The sadhana is not to reach to the self. Self is our real nature, here and now. If at all we need to do anything in sadhana, we just have to let go the idea of division, the idea of duality. What is, by naturally what is only self alone. And that is how the natural thing is. Self alone is. So, if at all we are seeing a division in the self alone is, it is only seen by me. And therefore, the sadhana has to be to only let go of that false division. And moment we let go, what we see, what we realize is self alone is. And by repeatedly or vigilantly keeping an eye to make sure that we let go all the divisions that rises, we are established in the self naturally. That is what we need to do. And to make that happen, Bhagavan has given us this Atma Vichara. In this Atma Vichara, all thoughts, we need to understand that all thoughts, including the I thought, is only a division. And therefore, all we need to do is let go them. We need not pay attention to them. And the only way to do that is inquire to whom is this? And recognize it is for me. And thereupon inquire, who am I really? What do I say as I within me? And when we go to the source of the I, when we go to the root of the I, we see that there is only being, consciousness, peace, bliss inside. That is my reality. There is no thoughts, no divisions that I need to attend to. It is a vast sky of peace, presence, and consciousness that is there. And by repeatedly letting go all the divisions causing thoughts, we are the self and we continue to remain in the self. This is the direct path to the self. And Bhagavan has blessed us this direct path. He has said, don't hold on to any knowledge, whether that knowledge is knowledge of the truth or the knowledge of ignorance or division. Don't hold to both, but go to the one to whom these occur. And that is best done with Atma Vichara, by inquiring to whom is this, who am I? And by repeatedly doing this, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to remain in the self without any divisions. And with the immense grace of Bhagwan, for the next 20 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara. Namo Ramana. Sarada ka there. Namo Ramana ka. I think Akka is having little difficulty in joining. We'll wait for her.
She just joined 1 second.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Namo Ramana. Can you hear me?
Yes, Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana. Shining is the self in all beings. By the abundant grace of that self, we have been meditating on the practice of self-inquiry. And in the path of meditating on the practice of self-inquiry, we were meditating last time on the question of the attitude towards self-inquiry. How should our self-inquiry practice be? And for that, the inspiration, of course, is Bhagavan's verse in Upadesha Saram, wherein he says, Sarada Chintanam Viralatasparam Ajyadharaya Srotasasamam, like a river. And in Ramana Gita, in the invocation verse, Ganapati Muni says that the Ramana Gita is like the Ganga. Galanti Gangeyam Vimalatara Gitaiva Mahato. It is like the Ganga which is flowing from Bhagavan into the sea of the hearts of the devotees. Bhakta Hridayam Samudram Samyati, he says. So this process of the sadhana, the practice, whichever the practice is, this process, can it be natural? Can it be full of love? Because Bhagavan says in his verse where he describes himself as Arunachala Ramana. When he is asked, who are you, Ramana? He replies, Ariyaditara Jivara Dahavarija Guhayil Arivai Rami Paramatman Arunachala Ramanan. He answers the question, who are you? Are you Shiva? Are you Subramanya? Are you Hari? Who are you? He says, Hariyadi Tarajivara Havarija Guhayil. I am that consciousness. He doesn't say I. He says Arunachala Ramana is that consciousness which is shining as in the hearts of all the beings, beginning from Hari. Hariyadi, from them onwards, in the hearts of all beings, that which shines as consciousness is Arunachala Ramana. So the question which was put to Bhagavan was, who are you? And this is his answer. But he does not stop his answer over there. He continues the answer as to how that arivu, how that consciousness can be reached. Parival ulamuruha. Parival ulamuruha. Says through love, the heart should be melting ulam uruha nalam paranarvidu guhayarndu, searching in the heart cave with love for that supreme. Then what will happen when one searches? Then Arivambi Tirava, the eye of consciousness will be opened. So what is this searching with love? What is the love which we should have? The love for the enquiry itself or the love for the self. When there is love, no questions would arise because it would be a natural, spontaneous process. And that's why I think the example of the river is given. I do not think the river plans that I should go cut the gorges, cut through the hills and come down into the plains and then keep moving. And I must not stop until I reach the sea. But she never stops. Sometimes she moves backwards. The Ganga sometimes moves backwards. And then it is said in a way that she goes back to the source, the Himalaya source. She turns back towards the source. And the places where she turns back are very sacred. They are called the Ghats. Especially in Haridwar, she is turning backwards. She's turning northwards. And that place is very sacred. In a way, it is like our turning back to the self. But the real movement of the river is towards the sea. We all know that. And Bhagavan says in Ashtakam, கடலெழும் எழிலியார் பொழிதரும் நீர்தான் கடநிலை அடைவரை தடை செய்ய நில்லாது. The water cannot stop. The water which is pouring down as rain cannot stop until it reaches its source. What is its source? Its source is the sea. Why is it the source? Because it has risen from the sea as vapor, become clouds, then pour down as rain somewhere on the earth, and then come up as a spring, then become a river, and then come back to the sea. And Bhagavan says, it cannot be stopped. And he says that our journey is also like that. He says, we cannot be stopped until we get back to the self. But we appear to be going here and there and meandering and going back and coming forward. But really, if we understand that all the movement is only towards the source, and if we can thereby surrender all our sense of doership, by understanding that we are not the doers, by understanding that there is nothing that is done by us, it is just natural. The gravity takes the water down, down. It will go to the sea. It will move towards the lower level until it gets back to the sea. Similarly, the attention will move down, down into the heart until it merges there. And if it is spontaneous, if it is loving, how to make it loving? If it is loving, nothing like it, right? Because then we don't have to plan our practice. We don't have to worry about our practice. We don't have to be anxious about our practice. It will just happen if it happens spontaneously. Like Cow Lakshmi, not only her love for Bhagavan, how did it happen that Cow Lakshmi would invariably give birth to a calf at the time of Bhagavan's Jayanti? How can it happen? How can it happen? It is just the spontaneous, overwhelming love which Lakshmi had for Bhagavan. One of my friends, when there was a death in the family, she told me, you know, Sarada, we can plan for the birth of a child. We can't plan the death, you see. And I wondered, I didn't tell her at that time, but I wondered, How can we imagine that we can plan for birth? But we imagine, we human beings imagine that we can plan many things, but without any planning, how beautifully, and Bhagwan's Jayanti would come on different days every year. It's not as if it comes on the same day every year. It comes on a different date of the Gregorian calendar every year. But how Lakshmi could give birth to a calf. And if we see her picture where Bhagwan is fondling her calf and she's standing in front with so much of joy, and it is absolute bliss. She's standing as Bhagavan is handling and fondling her calf. So that love for Bhagavan, that love otherwise for the self, if it is there, it will draw us automatically. It is said of Muruganar Swami, there is an incident where Bhagavan had gone with Ganapati Muni and others on a forest path to show them a special place in the inner forest path which was not known to anyone. That's what Bhagavan told them. This is a nice secret place I will show you. And what had happened is Muruganar Swami had gone for his bhiksha. He would go every day in the afternoon, he would go beg for food, and that was the one meal which he would have. And very often, when he washed his hands or something, that meal would also be taken away by the monkeys. So, but then he would go to the town and he would beg for food and come back to the hall after the lunch, and he found Bhagavan is not there. Nobody knows where Bhagavan has gone, but he found Bhagavan. And Bhagavan said, "Oh, how did Muruganar find us? This is a secret place. No one knows the way to this place. How did Muruganar find Bhagavan?" That is the overwhelming love. So that love, when we have that love for the self, when we have that love for the self, then the practice is something which will happen automatically. The inquiry is something which will happen automatically because of the love for the self, because of the need to be with the self, to be as the self. Because of that, what will happen is that the mind will turn again and again, it will turn inwards. It will not be drawn to various experiences. Again, Muruganar Swami says in his Vairagya Tirahavan, I am not drawn to any of these experiences, he says. In fact, it was so difficult for Muruganar to leave Bhagavan's physical presence. And when he was continuing to work in Chennai, then Madras, and he had to go back every time after the weekend, he would visit Bhagavan, would spend time with Bhagavan, and he had to go back. And it would not be possible for him to tear himself away. Actually, Kanakamma says it was like a bee which had fallen into a jar of honey. And how will it fly away from there? How will it move away from there? And Bhagavan was also so sweet. He knew Muruganar had to keep his job for whatever time he had to keep his job. And so when Muruganar had to go, Bhagavan would send somebody with him to the station to see to it that Muruganar went and boarded the train. And actually, on some occasions, what happened initially was somebody would go drop him at the station and come back, and Muruganar would also follow the person back to the ashram. He would board the train. He was standing there. The train may come and go. Go away. I wouldn't know. And then he would back to the ashram. So one would swap the devotee taking Muruganar, put him into the train, wait for the train to leave, and then come back to the ashram. That is kind of love. Is love something, the love for the self, the love for Bhagavan, is it something which has to happen of its own accord or cultivated? Actually, love is born, where there is attention. The more you attention to something, the more there is love for that. It's just attention. So that's why one says, pay attention to the self. How to pay attention to the self when we can't even see what the self is? But when we try to know what the self, when we try to the self, we are trying to pay attention to the self. When we are not interested in other thoughts, when we are ready to other thoughts with the question, for whom are these thoughts? They are only my thoughts. They are not I. But I want to know who I am. Without knowing who I am, of what use are all these thoughts for me? What use are they? Are mine. I don't even know whether they are mine because I don't know who I am. Then this question becomes something so important to us that full attention again and again towards self, then that question becomes the torchlight, says Bhagavan, on the self, on the ego self, whether it exists or this inquiry makes us turn to it and try to look at it, try to see who is this I? Who is it who is saying I? Every time I say I. In everything that I do, there is this I. Recently heard G. Kameshwar speaking about some verses, a story from Yoga Vasishtam. And the preamble, he said how Rama was in depression because he did not know the self at that point in the Leela. And he says, describing his condition, he says to Vasishta, in all that I do, I am not able to cut away my ego. Even if I do not act, I think that if I act, my ego rises. So I simply sit still. But still there is this ego. Lord, I do not know what it means to surrender. For in all I do, I cannot cut my eye asunder. How to cut away this I-ness? But then Bhagavan says, you can't cut it away, but do you know who is cutting and who is to be cut? Who is the I who is to be cut? He'll say to the devotees who ask him, cut my ego, he'll say, bring it in front of me. Make it stand here. I will cut it in a moment. So when we start asking ourselves, I simply presume that I know who I am. In everything, every moment a thought arises, that means I have already presumed I know who I am. And therefore, Bhagavan tells us, oh, if I have love, I must know who I am. If I have love for that knowledge, if I have love for that, if I have a yearning for knowing who I am, then this counter thought will rise. This thought is coming, but this is only a thought. I'm aware of the thought, but am I aware of who I am who is having this thought? I'm simply saying, simply thinking from moment to moment, I this, I that, I that, I this, I that. But who is this I? Who is this I? So when we turn back with that deep yearning to discover this I, then naturally it will be revealed. Thoughts do rise because of the strength of habit, which is called vasana. Many thoughts may rise, and any kind of thought may rise, as we are repeatedly being told by Dileep or by Nanda Kumarji or by Venkateshri in all our satsangs, as we are being repeatedly reminded of what Bhagavan says, that the any thought may arise, any thought may arise. But the method to deal with any thought is one and the same. whether it is fear which is arising, whether it is anger which is arising, whether it is wonder which is arising, whether it is joy which is arising, whether it is sorrow which is arising, no matter what thought, or it's just a simple thought of some noise or something happened yesterday, it's all one and the same. Though some of them seem to have a greater grip on us, some of them seem to be stronger thoughts. They are stronger because we have given them more attention. And as I said, attention makes something very vivid. It makes something very dear to us. The more we pay attention to it, the dearer it becomes, the more loved it becomes. So, because of paying attention, some of the thoughts are stronger, but they are all thoughts. They're all thoughts. This is what Bhagwan explains to us very beautifully. So, whenever a thought arises for us, to tell us is with great love, not by any coercion, not by forcing ourselves to turn within, not by thinking we're going to achieve anything, but just out of that love for being with the I. Who is this I? Who is this I? Just to know that, just because I want to know, I want to discover who this I is. If we keep turning within, if we keep turning within persistently, then that being of the very nature of love, it will envelop us as it were. The sense of separateness will be enveloped. The sense of separateness will be swallowed. That illusory sense of separateness will be swallowed, and the grace alone will remain. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. There seems to be some question. Is it? I cannot see, Dileep.
Yes, Saka, it
In the
is.
chat, can you see?
Yeah, it is by Janaki.
Can you move it?
It's by Janaki Ma. The question is, I have a question. Fears and doubts can also trouble you anytime. It need not be only during meditation. The question today we read was fears and doubt trouble us during meditation. But Janaki Ma is telling that it is not only during meditation, it can trouble us even during other times.
Bhagavan says all time is meditation time. All the time is meditation time. So, whenever anything troubles us, the same answer is there. He says 24/7 should be meditation time. Santatam salipara santoshamagave. 24/7, remember, get back to the question. So, whenever a doubt, meditation time, the special benefit of meditation time is that it's like having a control group in a psychology experiment. In a psychology experiment, the mouse, some experiment is done on the mouse. There is a simulated situation. It's not a real situation. It's not a real life situation. Or one can say it's like learning to do warfare. The princes are taught how to fight, or there is a mock fight which is happening for those who are soldiers who are trained, etc. Now, the mock fight is not the real fight, but the mock fight enables us to strengthen ourselves for the real fight. So, meditation time is not different from the rest of the time in the day, obviously not. Meditation time is only to be able to apply what we are doing under easier circumstances. Because easier, why? Because in meditation time, we are not moving physically, our are all withdrawn. At least there is an effort to withdraw the senses, and there's a possibility of withdrawing the senses, and sitting down during meditation time. Whereas when we are moving around, when we are in the midst of the office work, in the midst of the housework, when we are with people, it's very difficult to pull back the senses. I can't close my eyes at that time. I have to keep my eyes open, I have to keep my ears open. I may have to be eating something, tasting something. All this is happening. So, without all this, if I am able to tackle my thoughts, at least at that time, then there is a possibility that I can apply it little more easily when I am in the midst of the warfare, when I am in the midst of the emotion. If I am able to at least look at my thoughts even during meditation time, if I cannot drop my thoughts, then what to say of the time when I am actually in the midst of the world? So Bhagavan says, do this 20 minutes meditation. And in this 20 minutes meditation, it is a simulated world. It's very clear to us that everything is happening within us. Whereas it's so clear when we have our eyes open and we are working that everything is happening, actually still happening within us. That's not so clear to us. But when we have our eyes closed in meditation, it's very clear. This entire picture of thoughts are all just coming and rising. It's all within me. So at that time, if I first start practicing, if I first start applying what I have to do with my fears when they rise in meditation, if I can tackle them then what will happen when I get a fear when I'm not in meditation? The memory of what I did during meditation will rise and support me. It will remind me, you could drop this fear in meditation, right? You could ask for whom this fear was, right? Do that now also. Do that now also. So Bhagavan says this is the way we can expand. And all time will become meditation time when there is great love. When there is great love for Bhagavan, when there is great love for the self, or when there is love for inquiry itself. It's okay. Even if you have love for inquiry, it's fine. Whatever when there is love, there will be intensity. And there will be natural. There won't be any doubt because there are no choices in love. Love just is. So there are no choices. Whereas when we work with the intellect, then we have plenty of choices. We wonder whether we should do this or not do this, and why we should do this, and why we should not do this. All these questions come. But when one is in love, then no questions come, right? Because it's just there. You can't help it. It's just there. So by His grace, it will happen that love will come to us from the side. And then when that love comes, then it reveals because it does not resist the love. Or rather, the love does not resist its revelation. Whereas the intellect resists revelation. It intrudes, whereas the love does not do so. So when it ceases to intrude, then automatically we experience it. Thank you. Dileep, will you say the prayer?
Yes, Akka. Apara Satchit Sukhavaridashi Yasyor Vimatram Guvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gaviram Chinta Vihinam Vidichintayavi Chinta Vihinam Vidichintayavi. Namo Ramana. Thank you, Akka. Thank you all.